Anything else, mate? Can't hear. Right. I'm going to call for apologies, and I've got one from Councillor Wilson, and it looks like we're all the rest of us here except for Councillor Seymour is getting organised. So if someone would like to move by Councillor Burdett, second by Councillor McLean, all in favour, against, carried. Now we've got declarations of interest. Anybody here with a declaration of interest? Right, you're declaring you have a critical interest. All right. We'll deal with it as a conflict as it arises. Right. Confirmation of the non-confidential minutes. If someone would like to move by Councillor Burdett, second by Councillor McLean. And matters arising and the action sheet. Any matters arising? Okay, all in favour? Against? Carried. Right. Leave of absence, no one taking leave of absence. Acknowledgements and tributes, there's no acknowledgements or tributes. Right, we've got one public petition here. Mr. Terry Boyd, if you'd like to come up and make your presentation. If you don't switch that little light on your speaker, you'll get growled at. And you've been explained the protocols around your presentation. So if you'd like to proceed.
Well, basically as a Ruth Street resident, there's been quite a bit of a push and a lot of talk about Gwyneth Place, Ryman and its problems, and widening the road and pushing it out to Ruth Street. Now, obviously, as residents, there's 21 houses down there. There's also some Gwyneth Place people that don't want that to happen. And at the moment, it's about 8 years ago when that Ryman was first being developed. Supposedly there was an agreement with the Ruth Street residents and the council that there would be removable bollards put up between the two streets. That's never happened. And so at the moment there's an open gate for so-called emergencies, which was requested by Ryman, I hear. And the gate had a chain on it for about a year, and that was removed this time last week. And so my question basically is, why was the bollards never done? Why was it? It was never done. It hasn't been, many questions, many phone calls, and it's basically stayed the same. The extension part of Ruth Street, which is now Council Road Reserve, but it's maintained by 7 residents, is that should be closed off. As we're maintaining it, it shouldn't be used as a thoroughfare, and it can be, once the gate's open, it can be used as a thoroughfare, and really there's nothing to stop that. So either the road's open or it's closed is what we're saying. So the only other question I've got is what's going to happen there? And at the moment with the Ryman construction, if the emergency argument's used, you wouldn't get near the gate anyway. There's that many construction vehicles here, you can't move. So that's probably not, that's only the most important part really, is this future push to have Ruth Street extended. And we just want to know where the council's at with that, and the status of our road I know is road reserve, but the other option, preferred option of Potai Ave to Sunrise is that a road reserve as well. Is it, what's the status of that? Currently, I've heard that it's all go to go through there, but there's no, we sort of wanted to know where that stands. No, that's fine. Well, I'm just referring to the Appendix 20, which is the block infrastructure plan. That's 2011. Is that still current? Yes, the current plan, which I have in front of me, is at the Gwyneth Place, Ruth Street junction. There's a marked area which is vehicle severance point, and that's kind of, I'm not quite sure what that is. It's been marked in there, and it's always been questionable as whether that was at the bollards that was supposed to go in, or there's a lot of unknowns.
Got more to say, otherwise there's some questions.
I just have one question. Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. You mentioned earlier that in 2014 there were some discussions with Ruth Street and Gwyneth Place residents about putting in bollards, removable bollards there. Was that formal? Were there meetings with council people, or was it more
yes,
informal arrangement?
That's actually, it was pre-2014, and it was actually before I purchased my piece of my section. And so it's unfortunate that a couple of people that were there then are not here now, but there was an agreement, and according to one person I spoke to last night, said that should be on record. So that was my question, was what happened to that? And
so I just want to, just a supplementary question, just if you can maybe just elaborate a little bit on what was discussed then, because you touched on it and I thought, oh, I wonder what was the agreement or what was discussed?
Well,
what was your understanding of it?
Unfortunately, I wasn't there then, but this is what apparently it was talked about opening the road up then, and the residents obviously objected to that strongly for reasons of traffic flow, and there was going to be older residents there with walkers and wheelchairs, and which there are now. We get a lot of people walking through there, and they just said, well, that's not going to be, to increase traffic flow past an old people's home and past 21 houses is not as a lot more detrimental to the whole area than it is to say go down through Potai and go past say 6 houses, and there's a lot more distance from the roadway, the proposed roadway. So they came up with a solution that at the end by my place there'd be bollards put in which would be removable for emergency situations. And as far as I know, that was agreement between the council and the residents, and yeah, I would have to provide more details of which ones they are. Some of them are not there now, and so yeah.
In summary, if we were to summarise, your concerns are that, just a couple of sentences now, what are your main concerns? Is that it's a traffic drop-in there or a traffic flow issue?
Well, it will be if whatever, I mean, that's what I don't know, whether the priorities of the council is for one of the roads is going to be extended. But I mean, if you looked at the situation where obviously the preferred one for us is Potai, and I mean, if they were both opened up, then the effect wouldn't be the same. But Potai is a central, where the Potai comes off is a very central part of the whole Lytton West block, and we were just, sorry.
No, go, as is for.
And that's basically we're all going to, we bought down a cul-de-sac because we wanted to live down a cul-de-sac, and so we're sort of saying, well, obviously we're looking at our own interests as well, property values, traffic flow, and we would be happy for the infrastructure plan that's there now. If that vehicle severance point is what it is, then it could stay the same.
We're only allowed to ask questions, and so we can't have a discussion with you. But Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to ask if council officers are in any position to make any comment about the timeframes around Potai Ave, because I think we've had conversations about that going back some time, and it's still live.
So through the chair, we have got the improvements to Ruth Street and Gwyneth Place in the LTP as it's being proposed coming forward. They're in later years, from my understanding of where we sit. I'm happy to make the offer for staff to sit down with Mr. Boyd and the residents to talk through the current infrastructure plan that we have and where the timings are in the LTP, and see where those align, so that the residents have up-to-date information of where those things sit.
Thank you.
Satisfactory. Thank you for your time.
But in the meantime, Mr. Wilson will ensure people talk to the residents.
Shall I switch off?
Switch off. Thank you for coming along. Thanks, Terry. Discussed yesterday at EP&I and at ComDev.
Yeah, well, I mentioned it with David before, and he thought it would be a good idea to bring it up today and just get it pumped out in the media and everything, so you get as much exposure as possible so the word can get out there.
Thank you, Councillor Stoltz, for pointing that out.
No problem.
Through your worship, sorry, Chair, I've just promoted you.
I'll wear the Pope's hat.
So, Chair, the agenda on page 49, the Tairāwhiti Roads Capital Upgrades Project, mentions the Makarori car park, so if we can discuss it then, if that's okay.
Right.
We'll do it again then.
So through the chair, if I can first make apologies for Neville West, who's not here today because he's down in Havelock North. There's a meeting today of water managers about the outcomes of the Havelock North water inquiry. So apologies from Neville for not being here, but I think we all think it's in our best interest for him to be down there. I've got a short presentation to go with the paper that we have there, and it just quickly outlines the options that are included in the table of this report. And to preface the report, when staff drafted this together, we didn't want to come to you with the final answer because we wanted this to be something that you provide feedback in around the options of where you would like us to investigate further and where you'd like us to spend our time and energy in. So the staff are here today very much to seek direction from you and Kerry's here to take notes around what it is that you would like us to further develop up and which options you'd rather just leave by the wayside as we work through. So if it's okay with the chair, I'll quickly start the presentation. Yep. So we looked at a couple of different options, as you can see in the paper that's there, and these are purely for discussion. The first one that sits there is the status quo option, where we just carry on as we are. So in the draft LTP that we have at the moment, we have put some money aside to look at how we can fix some of the on-property issues that we have at the moment. The issue with status quo, of course, that yes, we'll carry on and we'll do things a little bit slowly. However, we won't be addressing the main issue that, of course, this committee discussed last year, that actually the rainwater going in is the real problem for us. So that's status quo. The exacerbated pays, now there's two options for this in there. And when we say the exacerbated, these are the properties that are actively contributing to the problem. These are the ones that are not dealing with their rainwater on property, it's ending up on somebody else's. And as we know from a lot of previous discussions, we need to treat the stormwater as a catchment because it may fall across multiple properties, but all drain out of one. So under this scenario, we would issue a notice to a property to say, you need to fix this. You've got X amount of days to do it, and it's your concern to do. The issue that we have with this, of course, is there's no real, I suppose, teeth to follow up on it. There's no real impetus for some owners to do anything. We give a notice, we're then going to have to figure out how we make people comply, or we encourage them to comply, and actually to enable them to comply as well. So to preface what we're talking about here, an on-property fix could be anything from a couple of $1,000s up to around $20,000 if it's fixing the stormwater for multiple properties. So it really is a case-by-case process as we work through that, but that's the kind of ballpark that we're talking about when we say what people are paying to fix some of these scenarios. The next one, step up from that, so from doing nothing to sending them a notice they need to do it, would actually be, well, we go on as council. So as you know, there are some properties where we've started trials on. Well, we've gone on and we've done the works, and we would then send people the bill out for that afterwards. There's an equity issue there where we send people bills for works that we do, whether they like it or not, whether or not they'll have the ability to pay, or if they may have wanted to do it in a different way or look at a different manner for which they were going to be doing. The other issue, of course, is we can send someone a bill, but whether or not they actually pay it is always something that we then need to work with, particularly when we're looking at a lot of these fixes in our low-income suburbs that we have. So quickly thinking about, okay, if we're going to make people pay for it, are we talking, and these are things for discussion, and it's just to preempt the discussion you're to have, is, do we say, here's the bill, we've done the work, you've got to pay within 90 days? Do you want to think about something like, if we do the work, that it's something that's paid back over rates, so we offer a loan type situation? So that would be similar to something around like was done for the warmer homes with the insulation, where that in some councils you're able to pay it back over your rates over a number of years. So there's options for that. However, of course, with anything like that, we'd have to be looking at our debt level for council, which that would be a consideration if we were going to be taking on more debt. And as you know from the discussions we've been having around the LTP, that's a serious consideration for us. And how we would recover those costs over time based on the expenditure are considerations that we'd need to be working through. So if we talk about, that's the exacerbated pays, the other option that we have there is actually that the wider rate payers pay. So this would be something that under this scenario, all of the ratepayers in the Gisborne urban area would be paying for the fixes on people's private property. And there's a whole range of pros and cons that are up there behind us, but under this model, it would be on the preface that we know that the rainwater getting into our system is causing our system to have overflows when we have heavy rain events. So it would be saying that this is a community problem and that this is something that the whole community therefore should be fixing. However, of course, it does mean that the wider ratepayers are paying to fix something on people's private property, and whether or not we want wider ratepayers paying for a private property issue, given that we know that some houses have actually already started the upgrades, but it's around spreading that cost across the wider community. Of course, further from that is, well, do we actually look at a cost share model? So is there a way that we could split it? And Councillor Wilson, as some of you are aware, has always talked about, well, what is an equitable split for what that could actually be? So there is a benefit to the wider community of having people's private people's private property stormwater dealt with effectively means that we don't need to upgrade our pipes out into the street. So there is a wider benefit there. However, there's also a big benefit for the people whose properties used to flood, no longer flooding. So though, who has the right inputs? And those are the discussions that we want to be having with you, is around, well, what do you think is an equitable split, if there's any split, or how you think the costs should be apportioned for anything to fix the issue that we have there. The other one, of course, is one that we have to, because we're exhausting all options here as we need to, and that would be that council wider ratepayers pay for it, the property owners pay for it, and that an external third party would come to help pay for the funding of some of that. So of course that's an attractive option for most people, because it means we get a third party to pay for it, and I'm not going to say the name, but it would be something that potentially could be done. The risk is, of course, we say that that's a great option and we can't actually find anybody to then come in and help assist with that funding. So it is an option that is there, potentially, that we look for a third party kind of impact investor as outlined in the report to actually come in and help with that. So I've given you a really quick overview of what's in the report, just because I know that the report does have quite a lot in it, and it's just to start the conversation off. We're not pushing any of the options there over the top of them. We're after direction from you as our committee to give us guidances around where you would like us to further develop the paper and the options are, to then be something to be recommended to council.
So do you have any idea of the cost per ratepayer at this point if it was just left to the private property owners? And then do you have any idea of what the cost would be if you did a 70-30 split, sort of, so that yeah, apart from what, yeah, like, oh, okay.
So through you, Chair, with the cost that we have in front of us in the LTP, we've identified that there's $13.5 million worth of work that we think needs to happen across private property within the Gisborne urban area to help fix the problem that we have in front of us.
Yeah.
As you're aware, we've targeted $500,000 in the draft LTP in order for us to move that forward. So if we were going to spread that cost over the 10 years, we'd need to find another $800,000 from wherever we were going to find it, on top of what we've already targeted for improvements over the 10-year program that we have in front of us. So it really does, I suppose the discussion you're asking is around that remaining. If we're going to pay for $5 million of it, where does the rest of it come from? If we're paying $500,000 per year for 10 years, where does the rest of the money come from, and where do the councillors want to see that?
May I suggest that I'd be sort of open to, almost open to, some sort of public share. You know, I think that there comes a time when maybe if it's too great for the individuals, then you might have to look at that. But it would concern me to some extent that many of the homes probably are investment homes for people. You know, they're not people's houses. People have bought them as rentals and investments, and I don't think they should be treated the same as where people are living in them. You know, and also like foreign ownership. There's a bit of foreign ownership. And also with Housing Corp, you know, those are people who I don't know that I would feel comfortable about asking the greater community to pay. And I certainly would have some sympathy towards low-income families who are struggling, and maybe if there was some mechanism by which we could ease that. But Councillor Seymour.
Thank you, Worship. Well, my first comment is that this paper should be something that all of council is contributing to, not just this committee. It's the kind of thing we should have workshopped before, because everyone around the table will have a view, and there are 9 councillors who represent the city whose constituents are going to be impacted by whatever this decision is, so it should have come to us sooner. At the minute, it's with us today, so we have to make the best of it. I will declare, as a landlord, we have fixed items on our property that were drawn to our attention by council, and I'm sure plenty of other people have too. But I guess if we've got to find 13 million, there may be a bit of common share. And I think there has been an effort made already to try to find the third party. So I don't think we should be hang our hat too much on a third party. But I just think we should have been actually having a real thrash of this with everybody around the table, because it's really significant, and it's going to be a significant part of the next 10 years for this district. And we're never going to sort our overflows out if we don't sort this item out. So I'm disappointed that it's come just to this committee when there are councillors who admittedly could be here today but aren't. But if it had been a workshop in the preparation of the 10-year plan, it would have been much more opportunity for a free and frank conversation between the whole 14 of us.
Councillor Stoll.
Thanks for this great day. I definitely lean towards us working out what is a fair and equitable. So I'm supporting us workshop, like Councillor Seymour said, workshopping this or taking a good look at what type of properties are affected, how we can assist, what will it do on our to our rates. But one thing I want to just draw your attention to is on page 18, which is one of the risks there at 32. As you know, this is a process that will happen in parallel to us trying to remove 85% of fast water out of our wastewater system. Am I correct, Dave? These are two separate processes. In the one area, we're trying to remove the 85% of the fast response water. And then on top of that, we're also trying to address some stuff on private properties. Or am I misunderstanding the process?
So through the chair, the DrainWise program covers the fast response water that comes in. So that is the stuff that comes straight off people's roofs and into the system by the downpipes, or it can be flooding of the gully traps and those things. So that is part of that. DrainWise, we're looking at the fast stuff that comes in now because that's where we see the biggest peaks for us to be able to deal with. The second longer part of the game is the stuff that we can't see underneath the ground. So that's where we start looking at the cracked pipes, the water table coming up through the pipes and those things. But what we want to, and this committee has previously agreed to target, is that quick flow of rain when we get it.
Okay. No, that's fine.
Councillor Burdett and Councillor Foster.
Mr. Chairman, how many papers and reports have come before this committee and other committees over the last 10 years dealing with the same subject? You go to page 23 and have a look. Council, future priority committee were unanimous in their support, September 2017, that on property flooding is a situation that must not continue to occur, that it is a fundamental infrastructure issue that must be fixed as a priority. I'm a bit hard-nosed about this one in terms of prior to you becoming the chairman of Assets and Infrastructure. At Assets, we'd spent something like 22 million then, going back a while, to try and fix this problem. Now we've got a $30.5 million question in front of us. I think we should just bite the bullet and get on. If it's going to upset people, but get stuck into it, because it'll never get resolved as long as we sit talking to more reports.
I think that we all feel like that. It's just the process we're going through now is how, and like obviously funding is going to be a big issue. So,
but we've all, sorry, supplementary to that, Mr. Chairman, we've all been on the bus and looked directly at the problem. Yep. Twice. Yep. So let's have a little bit of decision making.
We all know this problem. Councillor Foster. Then come down this way.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, look, at the end of the day, we're trying to mitigate the amount of outfalls that we have in the rivers every year, and we had 5 last year, the most we've had for a long time. And with the weather patterns the way we're seeing in the future, it looks like it's going to continue if we remain the same. Now, when I read through this paper here and saw that 50% of the houses in Kaiti haven't even got any stormwater drainage whatsoever, you've got to think, my goodness, this is unbelievable in our modern day and age. We've got 50% of all the houses in Kaiti. I don't know if there's some Housing New Zealand ones amongst them or not, which would be quite scary if it is. But that's huge. So there's no drainage problem, no drainage criteria at all. So we're virtually having to start from scratch with all these properties. And I guess there are, on top of that, there are probably ones that have got a drainage, stormwater drainage system that are probably antiquated and not working efficiently either. And the only way we're addressing it is by going door to door with our DrainWise project to get to the bottom of the whole situation. But when we look at the whole funding side of things, it's a beast. It's huge, and I believe it is a community problem. We all want to stop the amount of opening up the gates, so to speak, every time we have a heavy rainfall and the raw sewage going down our rivers out to the ocean. That's our quest, is to stop that as many times as possible. So we've got a huge problem on our hands that we've got to try and get to the bottom of.
So basically, I think that all the options that have been put up here today, and with the consideration of what Councillor Seymour was saying, that it possibly, could have been a strategic discussion at FT, but every single one of these options are going to do what you're asking. It's just the process around. So, yeah, Councillor Dunn.
Yeah, this is a really good report. I enjoyed it. I read the whole thing and then I kind of flipped it on its head and I realised that the Appendix 1, which is the responsibility analysis, is what should be, I arrived at the conclusion that should be driving who pays. So that's saying that where the issue lies and who should pay for it. If one of them, for example, on page 35 says stormwater disconnected to the ground, so basically there's houses that don't have stormwater infrastructure. I don't believe that every ratepayer in Gisborne should have to pay for a household to have stormwater infrastructure. So I think that the responsibility analysis should drive who pays for what. There's areas where it definitely lies on private land, and there's areas where we can definitely come in and help, should it be a downstream problem. So I ended up going around the other way and thinking, don't start by saying who's going to pay. Look at what the issue is, where it lies, and then attach who pays based on that analysis.
Question, before we carry on with Councillor McLean, we really have got the issue sorted though, that we do know where it lies with regard to getting that quick fix, don't we? Like that 85% you're talking about.
So through you, Chair, there are definitely options, and part of what the DrainWise team have been doing is going around recording where there is, as Councillor Dunn says, no infrastructure there, and it's something that needs to be done. And it's around how we fix that work and get those repairs done is the issue for us because of how we fund them. There are some where there definitely is a public good because 6 houses can be fixed by one improvement that may cost a few $1,000s by putting in the infrastructure to drain the receiving property of the other houses around it. I know a number of councillors have been out to Torini Street, for example, where by putting in a sump and draining it out, 6 houses no longer flood. Those are the sort of improvements that we're looking to do through the $500,000 in the draft LTP, is to roll out more of those improvements across those suburbs to help. It's where we start to get to the fact that where people have changed the contour of their garden because they want to make it flat, that actually that was the drain, that was the neighbourhood and it's run right through the back. Now it's been filled in or it's been blocked. Those are the ones that we need to work through with landowners to do that. It's how we pay for some of those specific fixes just for those one properties.
Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I sort of support a cost share basis. There would be people, those houses would have changed hands probably several times. And if they were just landlords, they're probably not even aware that the connection from the stormwater is incorrect. So I don't believe it's a total city or urban cost. I think it should be a cost share to the people concerned. And I would certainly support that. But I don't support different types of ownership being treated differently. we would get ourselves into a heap of trouble doing that. So everybody, whatever option we come up with, it's the same for everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Can I ask questions now?
You may. As long as you turn your thing on.
Yeah. Take it off now. How effective would it be if we served abatement notices on the affected houses and said, get it done? How would it work? Because in real life, for all of us, that's what happens. But because we're a council and a bit timid about doing that, it might not happen.
So through the chair, one of the things we'd have to do would be to create a bylaw that enables us to be able to instruct people to do that, and then we'd look at enforcement of it as well. It'd be one of the things that would become quite expensive for us to administer, and we would have to look and see how effective it was going to be versus the cost of chasing to get things. Bear in mind, we would be talking to some property owners to say they need to do an $8,000 to $10,000 upgrade on their property, which would become a real affordability concern for some people if we gave them a short time frame. As Councillor Seymour said, some property owners are responsible. When they find out that they're causing part of the problem, they do go along and do a private fix pretty quick. As you know, with our DrainWise team, they're doing some of the low-hanging fruit now around fixing up gully traps and tidying things up because it's quite a low cost and it's easier than us bothering to send letters, chase it up, then go back around and see if it's been done. So the team are doing it as part of the inspections, and that is proving quite successful what they're doing there.
Suppose, Mr. Chairman, what I'm saying is, council serves an abatement notice on me to fix my fences on the highway. What's the difference between that action and getting someone to fix the problem in their backyard?
So the highway we have a bylaw for, so we have rules and we have enforcement powers around that. We'd need to draft something up if we were going to do that around stormwater and making people do that. We don't have a specific enough policy at the moment for us to be able to require people to fix it at the moment.
Councillor Stonks.
Thank you. I don't agree with the harsh actions next to me, obviously not. I don't think it's the tairāwhiti way just to hand out abatement notices.
You better turn this thing off before you start
Oh, there we go.
talking bad about them.
Even though it is a city-wise problem, what Dave is alluding to is that there are very specific areas where we know the issues. And if we, to me, thinking about funding now, why don't we just focus our attention first? And contrary to what Councillor McLean said, I do believe we need to do some of these conditions or situations will be different. We can't just have a blanket approach to housing because there will be different circumstances, different exacerbators, and maybe if we look at tackling those big ones first that we know about, and then as we go learn from it, and then decide what funding options would work best. So that's what I would lean towards, not abatement notices.
Councillor Seymour.
Thank you. I'm just responding to the fact that we can't do the work and send the bill because we were able to 10 years ago. So what's changed? I mean, since I've been on council, we did have that process in place where people didn't respond. So, and I'm actually with Councillor McLean. I don't think that we can treat people differently. I think that it may be that we bring a group together as Mr. Wilson has suggested and group work is done, but I can't see why the collective urban ratepayers have to pay for that and why it can't be then shared between, and the example used was 6 houses, why that cost, which was intimated not huge, couldn't then be shared by those 6 houses who are not getting flooded all the time. I mean, this is the modern world we live in, and we all have a responsibility to look after our properties and ideally not flood the neighbours. So if 6 people are getting a benefit, or 6 residences are getting a benefit from a piece of work that this council is doing, and it might not be the 2,000 that was quoted, but might be a not huge figure, then wouldn't it be reasonable that everybody shared in that? And that's sort of help everyone's situation, because then the money goes a whole lot further if we all pay our share. Exactly. That's why it is quite a complex issue, and we should have workshopped it, as my colleague is just saying.
Yes,
Because arriving Mr. Chairman, arriving at a solution agreed by 50% of council is not necessarily going to avoid the similar type of conversation that we're having now being repeated when the rest of our colleagues get the opportunity to have a say themselves.
Yes, I hear what you're coming from, and I do agree with you. And the only thing is, it's very hard, I find, to give guidance on this when again, there's got to be a series of numbers. Like if we did, for an example, and you talked about funding it as a loan against rates over a long period. Again, like you say, but then that increases debt. Well, that's debt with a little bit of a set responsibility. It's not really the same as sort of an ongoing sort of just there is a certain responsibility to that debt which can be sheeted back. The other thing, I think, well, if we saw some numbers about where, over say, individual properties around there sharing the cost over 10 years, what would it actually increase their rates? What that sort of thing. It'd make decisions like this a hell of a lot easier.
Through the chair, can I clarify for you, this committee requested this paper 3 months ago to come back to this committee to workshop the options to then make a recommendation to council.
Yes.
What we are seeking guidance from you today.
This is not a workshop, this is a full agenda.
We're after a decision today from you around which options you would like us to develop up to then bring back so you can recommend to council. We're not asking for a decision from you today to then go away and do it. So from what I've heard so far, part of what you'd like us to do is look at the options and the implications for each of the individual property owners and how that may be, as Councillor Dunn has suggested, depending on working back of what the actual issue is that needs to be funded, how that would then look to those people to then look at how costs would be attributed based on the fact of the issue that private property was facing. So if we came back with some criteria for you based on cost, then looking at how that would then be funded, depending on what the exacerbator or the issue is that we're looking to resolve, to then look and see how that works for you with some examples of costings and things, that would be useful.
Just wanted to add on to that, precisely that, and all it really is Appendix 1, you're adding another table in there beside private or public or both, and then what the options are for paying for it in that table, and there's going to be a range, I imagine. So we're kind of saying that we like all of the costing options you've got. It just depends on we need to tag that particular option to, yeah. So I just see it as another column in there.
Mm. Yeah. Well, yeah, just what I was going to add to is, I mean, you use the scenario in Torini Street of 6 properties that were remedied by one fix, which so if we look at that and we ascertain the cost of that and the spread over 6 properties, we get an idea of what's possible, and we might be finding there's a lot of other areas where there might be 10 or 20 properties with a similar quick fix with some drainage, open drainage, connecting onto a network that could be appropriate. So bringing that kind of scenario back, would be beneficial. But then, because then we can get our head around what actually cost per property it will be, I don't know, maybe to get an idea of the whole net.
Sort of thinking that we could leave this paper and put a number 3 in there around what you were saying. Sure. Would that work?
Yep.
So if we let this paper lie, and we'll put number 3 in around development of implications of the options and well, yes, but we're obviously not satisfied to make a decision around where to go with it, because we've sort of identified areas where we'd like a little bit more.
It'll return, the paper will return with a 3rd column on it, or the column as Councillor Dunn has suggested.
Mm. Okay, so
Just worded differently, I think. Instead of saying that these are the options we want. We've just reversed it and said, here's the problem and here's how we think these are the best options to deal with those issues. So just flip it on its head, basically.
Okay. Does everybody understand that?
Mm.
And everybody happy with that?
Yes.
So if you'd like to just clarify what we're
Will you read the wording?
can you just put something in there? What you're going to do with that?
And you're right, Helen. The instructions there as to which options identified are to be further developed is option 2, instruct staff to further develop the options identified and report back to the committee. It's quite simple.
Second.
Happy with that, everyone? So I've got to move it in, Councillor McLean, and second it in. I moved. Oh, wrong way around. Okay, Councillor Stoltz, sorry. Stoltz. And second by Councillor McLean. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
So just by doing this, we're not stopping anything that's progressing at the moment. Everything is going on track with drain-wise, being funded accordingly. This is just looking at the big picture and coming back with some solutions for later. Yeah.
Going in the LTP.
So through the chair, the process, this is running parallel to what is already proposed in the draft LTP. So the draft LTP, as I said, has $500,000 from 1st of July 2018 for us to start spending on fixing some of the issues on private property. So rolling out more of those multiple property fixes to get the benefit where we need to in some areas. So that will still carry on. This is how we deal with some of the other non-low hanging fruit going forward.
Good. Okay, then we'll move on. Go to page 40.
We had this, we've already seen this at EPNR.
Have you?
We're
Moved
into
by Councillor
duplication.
Burdett. I'll second it. So the discussion. Would you like to give us a bit of a...
Through you, Mr. Chair, so I can just give, for the benefit of those members of the committee who weren't at EPNR yesterday, I guess that gravel is something which we traditionally regarded as something that we've got an abundance of, perhaps an overabundance of. And this report just updates on the state of gravel resources. And probably the key thing to be aware of is that we are now starting to see in some of our rivers a slowing of the rate of gravel aggradation in the beds, and that's as a result of all of the planting work that's been done over the last 20 years. And of course, we've got a really big increase in demand from both forestry road construction, and also there may be some demand from our own roading network. So it's really just to let the committee be aware of that the implications of that is that over time we'll be moving some gravel operations to different rivers. Particularly, we're seeing now the Matar River is starting to stabilise and down cut. There was 29 metres of gravel built up there, so it's not like we're running out of resource tomorrow, but we'll be eventually moving a lot of those big operations down more towards the Waipa River. And also the other river to be aware of is the Karaka Tūwhero, which is obviously got much harder rock than some other parts of the district, and that's often been seen as quite a desirable source of gravel, but the work's showing that actually the gravel resource there may be fully allocated. So we are intending to prepare a gravel management plan for that river and also for the Matar, because it's the one that's getting such a large amount of gravel taken from it. So it's really just a bit of an update, and I guess there is some good news in there, and that all of the work done over the many years planting in the upper catchments is starting to actually come through in terms of effects, positive effects on the rivers.
Terrible things, they should be automatic. But if they've stopped the are you sort of able to just keep going down and back to historical levels?
That's probably the key purpose of preparing a gravel management plan, is to work out to what level we can allow abstraction down, because when we've got rapid aggradation, a big thing we're managing rivers for is not to have our bridges be overtopped, as has happened in some of our rivers. So once we're in a down cutting situation, we've got to be thinking about things like the scour on infrastructure. Also just that we don't want to create an erosion problem. So preparing a gravel management plan for those rivers that are starting to look like we need to manage the resource more carefully, we'll actually have to look at what's a kind of sustainable rate of gravel to come out of those. So that would be the key purpose.
It's just that I remember many years ago, I used to go fishing up a little stream on the coast of Waiankia Stream, and you'd be climbing over boulders and finding a nice hole and catching a fish, and it was a wonderful walk. And then after one of the big storms, it's like a 3-lane highway up there, smooth gravel, and then that little. So, are we able to take? You know, obviously you've got a plan which would look at how far back towards that you could go. Yeah. We have to set up plan. Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we'd probably at the very start of understanding, we didn't realise until we did this work that actually we'd started having our riverbeds starting to downgrade. So it's really useful to be at that point of understanding, but we've got a bit of work to work out what's the optimum level for us to be managing the rivers to.
Councillor Seymour, did you have a question?
Yes, no, I just want to say thank you to the council officers for the preparation of the report. We discussed it yesterday, and it does lay out clearly on page 42 the state of our rivers, and I'd be happy to move the content of the report.
I've just got a question. Obviously, the quality of roading is reflected in the quality of gravel. So by reading this, it looks like our quality of gravel is diminishing. And so we're having to use gravel of not the ultimate quality. So that eventually is going to have an effect on the quality of our roading.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I think that we've got variable resource. Definitely some of the stuff gravel's a kind word to describe it, because it pretty quickly becomes mush, and the Poropoto River would be an example of that, where really it's, you know, we've got vast quantities of material that no one would want to put on a road. But we think that that's one of the reasons why such a lot of abstraction is taken out of the Matar, because actually it moves through a more mixed geology. And that gravel, which is down cutting now or the river's down cutting now where we're currently taking the gravel, part of what's happened is it's moved further downstream. So by moving operations further downstream, there still should be a reasonable quality of gravel resource that people are able to take. It's just that it will be in a new location. But we will eventually reach the point where the gravel resource will get quite a lot lower in quality, because of course the harder rock is the stuff that's not eroding as fast. And that's essentially what's happened in the Karakatū Whero. The sort of post 1980s storms, particularly Bowler, brought down a lot of material, but we've had no significant event since that time, and so which is a good thing. So it does mean that the harder rock is much more stable. It's not coming down the rivers as fast.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to move the receipt of the paper, because it's for information for this committee, and it really is just affirmation for the Tokomara Bay Charitable Trust to continue to work to secure the funding to help to repair the Tokomara Bay Wharf. And there is clearly issues of, that Hicks Bay community are looking at in relation to their wharf. So this is an opportunity for us to be updated. And I'd just like to move receipt of the paper.
I'll second that. I also want to make a comment that it is really sad to see that people are stealing our safety rings. This is an investment by council for the safety of the people that use the wharves. And it's an absolute disgrace that people are stealing these rings and forcing ratepayers to fork out more money to replace these life rings again. So I just want to say that. Thank you, and I second it. No? Aye. Oh, there's a next one for Dave.
So just quickly, for the one on page 75, this was another report asked for by the committee, was around where have we, you knew that we were making applications to NZTA, so this was just to update you on what those applications were, so that you can see the amounts that we've requested and the time frame for when we're looking to hear back from that. So Dave's happy to take, or Dave and I are happy to take any questions on there.
Yeah, certainly. And the agency or the finance investment people are reviewing the first two. So we'll get some feedback and we'll go back from there. Yes, that's right. Yeah. I did too.
Through you, Chair, we're happy to take the report as read. I know Helen Harris is still here, so if there's any specific questions, I may have to throw to her. Any questions?
Okay, I'll move the notes to the report. Second by Councillor Burdett. Any other comments or any questions?
I guess, yeah, I'll just speak on here. The Makarori car park has come up at the previous meetings yesterday with community development, and I heard in the afternoon as well. But there's a petition out. 700 odd people have signed up to it. But I think if everyone knew what the plans were for the future, then it would alleviate some of the concerns that some of the surfing fraternity and people that frequent the Makarori would have. So I know there's an upgrade but going to be happening next month with, well, actually I'll leave it up to David. David, he's the expert on the area, so if he could let us know what the plans are, and hopefully that will alleviate some of the concerns that the people that are driving this petition will have, because it won't alleviate totally the freedom camping, but it will identify where they can and can't be, and the congestion that's been caused.
So through the chair, yes, the Makarori car park is one of the ones that is looking as part of the upgrades that we have from NZTA funding going forward. More than happy for the team, once we have the concepts and the designs finalised, to share those with the community, and we'll put those out through Facebook, which I understand is the tool that's being used around the petition and driving that at the moment. One of the things, though, that I do want to manage expectations around is this is part of the rest area upgrades that are going forward. The freedom camping is a wider district issue, so that would be something that the community development and the EP&R committee would need to be looking at if there was going to be some changes there. There will be better parking provision out there. There will be better lines and better signs for where people can park, but I just want to say it's not going to be the silver bullet to some of the freedom camping issues that we do face in this region. We are aware of the increasing competition for car parks out at Makadori, particularly when there's a comp on or when the surf's good and there are people camping. Our environment regulatory team do check it twice a day. It is one that we are monitoring the situation as it goes forward, but we'll make sure that we share with the community once we get those designs and everything back from the safety engineers.
Frame for that might be, please.
So through the chair, the designs are being finalised now. The car park upgrades will be completed by June of 2018.
Okay.
Just one last comment about this. I know we discussed it yesterday in relative detail. I missed the ComDef, or not missed the Com, I'm not on that committee. But to me, I know what Dave just said, it's two total separate issues, the parking issue and then the freedom camping issue. And we are addressing the issue a little bit through parking improvements. But then time and time again, the freedom camping issue comes up, and I know the Rugby World Cup 2011 regulations shook things up a bit for us. And ever since then, policing freedom camping has not been easy. So I would urge council staff, or I think we have discussed it in the past, that we re-look at how we can streamline our freedom camping policing, or because we've got the two different types of camping. It's confusing for everyone. So I would ask if we can re-look at this issue, because I do think people love to use our coast, but we do want locals and freedom campers to have a great experience. And that is then, I don't know when it's time again to review our freedom camping policy, because we've done it recently, relatively recently. But I do think there's still work to be done there to make it easy for councillors staff as well as the users of the freedom camping and our locals who use it and don't use it. So I would urge staff, maybe we can re-look at this sometime and then address, I'm going to finish soon, just because there are 700 people that signed a petition says to, I know Councillor Cranston yesterday commented that he observed and that it wasn't such a great issue, but still to me, having 700 people saying this is of concern to us, that to me says we need to listen. There are some things that concern us about what's going on there. So to me, it would be irresponsible if we don't listen and respond. Thank you.
Thank you. As someone who observes those car parks and that freedom camping area almost every day, I don't think it's as big an issue as it's made out to be. And I think some of the comments that are on Facebook, which is not a petition as such, it's easy for people to make a comment on Facebook, are quite inflammatory. And we do actually say quite often that we're really keen about tourism in this town. So we actually do have to rationalise the whole thing. I agree there's been some issues over rubbish, and I don't think it's necessarily the freedom campers. The rubbish has had a really encouraging signage in the locations where rubbish from our local campsites are to be put. And I noticed this morning 2 cumulative piles that are not blue bags appearing beneath the signs that we as council put out there. So there definitely are some issues around how people use our beachfront, but it's really great that they do use the beachfront, and it's a lovely holiday place for our own community to use, and the weather sent many of them away, so it wasn't nearly as busy this year as it has been in the past. So I just think we need to take a deep breath over all those debates around that particular car park. Can I just make some specific comments about this paper? On page 47, I just want to look at the Barkers Hill shared pathway. And it did start on 27th of November, and the project's supposed to take 16 weeks and it's going to be finished by the end of May. That's longer than 16 weeks. And certainly well into January, nothing was happening. So I know it is happening again now. So we just need to make sure we keep our projects moving along. And one question I'd really like to ask, if I may, is how many rest areas are to be funded on State Highway 35? Is there a number? The paper's on the bottom of page 48 and the top of page 49, and I know there's some work being done by NZTA. Can I ask if there's any idea how many that we're likely to be put in place? And one of the things that we might be able to add to it, which again came out of this very same conversation yesterday, is perhaps they could be invited to look at a little, it might not be a full rest area, but the location of the public toilets opposite the Okatu store. When the conversation went around community facilities, that area is used a lot by both log trucks and our community to stop to use that toilet. So if NZTA are going to be kind and give us some more lay-bys and rest areas, then one, because it ends up being a great big hole which ends up with water in it, and even right now it's a great big hole, it would seem to me a good place for there to be a bit tidier tar ceiling and while they're at it. So do we know any answers?
Yes, so through the chair, we have 5 rest areas that were agreed to be done through the Economic Action Plan. So that was agreed by the previous government when they were here to do the 5 that we have in front of us. We haven't looked at Okatu. There was a criteria that was worked through with this committee and with the road safety engineers around where we were going to be locating the rest areas going forward. And Makarori was the closest one to town that they were looking at doing on the way up through.
That will, can I just, and supplementary to that, that Makarori picnic area, that is very well used. If we're to take it that that is the north end of Makarori, and the picture doesn't really look like the north end.
Through the chair, that's the southern car park.
So is NZTA in fact paying for the upgrade to the car park at Makarori? The surface car park which this ratepayers paid for?
Through the chair, all of these projects are paid for by NZTA. They're inside the NZTA road reserve for the state highway.
Okay, so is there any chance of us talking to them about opposite, it's not directly opposite the Okatu store, and it's not for the benefit particularly, because that makes it sound like it is, but around that rest area, which is really well used?
I think we're already talking, she's writing notes.
Great, thank you.
Okay, can I ask a question, please, and maybe
Goodness gracious me. Just leave it on. I might poop. And obviously we've had the explanation of the delay on the motor bridge. Could you update us of where we're at with that, and or someone update us where we're at with that, and when can we expect to be using it?
Through the chair, the Gisborne Herald made a request of the New Zealand Transport Agency and a document has been released to them. There is actually no delay on the bridge. It is still planned for opening in May 2018. There's been some extra work that's been required at the southern end of the bridge. And
can we confirm that's with regard to the new freshwater plan? Is that related to that, or is it, so I understood the issue? I haven't seen anything else.
So through the chair, if I can read the release from the Transport Agency around this, the reason that we're being pedantic around the wording is this is not a GDC project. This is one that's been driven by a different team, and it's a New Zealand Transport Agency one. So the wording that we have here is the Motu Bridge construction is progressing well and nearing the completion as programmed by the end of February. The tie-in road construction and landscaping to be completed up to Te Wera Road, and the new bridge will be open to traffic by May 2018. Once the new bridge is fully connected to the State Highway 2 new alignment, the old bridge will be removed. The last 200 metres of the proposed road construction is progressing, but is the challenging part of the project due to the soft ground conditions beneath the proposed retaining wall at the southern end. The project team and the contractor have been working closely together to overcome the difficult ground conditions with an updated design and completing necessary resource consent applications and property negotiation. The difficult ground conditions at the south end will not affect the new bridge opening by May 2018.
Okay. So Councillor Burdett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's David with Terms Winners.
Just leave it on, just leave it on.
Those passing lanes or those rest areas, if you could cast your mind back to the Coast Road Highway 35 as you climb past the Hungia turnoff on the left-hand side, there's a pine area and a parking area where people park, but both the entranceways have got rather dilapidated cattle stops, if they still exist. The road's in shocking condition. I don't think SSC ran a grader over the whole time over there. But I thought that was part of the considered rest areas that was going to have some money spent on it. Because that now belongs to the Transport Agency, and when the council agreed to sell it to them, they said that they would upgrade it and make it a very presentable rest area.
I'm aware of the rest area that you're talking about, Councillor Burdett. I'll come back to the committee with what's happening with it and where that sits. I know it's not part of the 5 that's on the upgrade, but I'll check with the team around where it is and report at the next committee meeting.
Which is a passing supplementary, Mr. Chairman. There's a specific passing lane there.
Okay. Any other?
Second, yeah.
Second by Councillor Lane. Any other debate? Any other queries? Any other questions? All in favour? Against? Carried. Road safety activities update.
Second.
Second by Councillor Burdett. Take it as read.
Yeah.
All in favour? Against? Carried. Joss, greetings. Greetings. Welcome. Okay, Joss, is there anything you'd like to tell us about?
Good afternoon, councillors. Please take the report as read. If you've got any questions with regard to the report, happy to answer them.
Thank you. First of all, can you advise us if the property acquisitions, while 5 are still to be purchased, is there agreement been reached with those 5 landowners?
The agreement is not reached until the contract is signed. So until the paperwork is signed, that's when agreement is reached. Although vast majority of the conditions and detail has been more or less agreed in principle.
Right, thank you. Yesterday at EPNR, we were given to understand, it just happened to come up informally, that there will be a substantial delay now in the application for the resource consent. Is that correct? The hearing was originally, this paper is telling us that the hearing was originally scheduled for the 6th of December, but there are some issues around it, and just so we can be clear about what the timeframes are, so the public understand as well. So can you update us with the new timeframes?
Yes, through the chair. The resource consent has been adjourned. So because the timing of it was to align with construction for this summer, any adjournment sort of pushes that off the table. So now we have ample time to regroup and refine the information that we have, and the hearing has been scheduled, not formally set as yet, but tentatively set for June this year. So that's the date that we're working towards, and with every intent and endeavour to construct next construction season.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks very much.
Any other questions?
It's not good. We need to keep focused on it.
given that and I know I've been told a straight yes before something, but given that the cost of purchasing the land is quite substantial in the big picture, like it's quite a big part of how have we managed to date not owning the land, and we've obviously built a stock bank there in the past under some sort of some easement that we can go and maintain it, and the private people have either continued to own their land with some sort of compensation or something like that. I wouldn't know, but that's how I would envisage it. What wasn't working about that we actually have to put up a capital, quite a lot of capital, to actually buy the land to do it?
I can respond to that. So there is the Soil Conservation Act 1941, which gives us quite strong powers to go onto property to do work with regard to the stock banks. However, when we don't own that land, there is issues with the landowner undertaking, I guess, works with the structure of those stock banks, putting pipes in, ducts, fencing, or managing that land in such a way that increases the risk of failure or breach of those stock banks. We do own a large amount of the stock bank footprint throughout the scheme, but for those areas we don't own, there is an increased risk of failure. To sort of raise or put an example of that, when we're doing the stage 1 detailed design, going through that process, came across a pipe that had been informally put through the stock bank without our knowledge. The backfill around that was likely to be inadequate because it wouldn't have been compacted or constructed as per standard. So the problem with that is when you have a flood event and the level is increased for a duration, you've got weak areas within the stock bank, and therefore you've got a failure as well. And where we've got, where we own that land, there's less of the ability or the confidence, I guess, of the person that owns it to just go and do with that land what they wish, and they may think that they're doing the right thing, but in some cases that's not the case.
Under a non-ownership model, you can't say, hey, you're not allowed to put pipes through there, or you can't do that. You have no, when you say you don't have control.
We still do have that ability.
Yep.
However, it's not as strong.
Yep.
So it's not ideal. And when we're, the whole purpose of the stock bank is to protect the thousands of properties and landowners and $1 billion worth of assets and infrastructure, it's fairly critical to the success of the scheme that we own it and can inspect it on a regular basis and control all the activities that occur on those assets.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, just one question. We know that GHL are looking for finishing land for sheep. Has there been any conversation? Is there any land that could be, that is acquired and owned by council that could be utilised for finishing sheep? Because it's close to. Is that a conversation that's happened? Or?
I can't comment on that.
Yeah. Councillor Foster, I think that was an idea that was floated, and we had a bit of a discussion about that. They pretty quickly realised that it wasn't going to work, because to start with, sheep walk across shallow rivers and you can't fence down there, and you've got to be on site all the time to monitor stock. And if it's different if you're living right there beside, you can have a look, make sure your cattle haven't gone too far. But and also you don't have access off the riverbank like if you own the land next door. So you might have a 6 or 7 kilometre walk to get stock out of there if it's going to rain. It just so I think that they've realised that it might have been a bit of a good idea that went wrong.
Thank you, councillors.
sorry.
I'll take the report as read, Chair. We are aware of the underspend we have in some areas and overspends in others. So as you're aware, and we've previously said this morning at Finance and Audit, the roading overspend, we're looking to pull back as we work through the rest of this financial year. And the underspend, particularly in the stormwater and in the water department, those contracts have now all been let, bar one, and we're expecting those to then bring those budgets back in online. So we're expecting to be very close to budget by the end of this financial year.
Anybody else got a comment? Anybody got a question?
The meeting is a public excluded session on the network outcome contract. We'll talk about it then. But I just over the page of it, Dave, there's a session, and I did ask the CEO yesterday on the Waipu River on page 18. Ruatoria flood protection provide a means of halting, slowing down erosion. Now that bit there, we know that all those dollars are sitting there, but in terms of the Waipu River, apart from what Nadine said yesterday, the $80,000 that are going into the river, next long-term plan, and then at the bottom, ratepayer funding from 2018-19 onwards has been withdrawn during the 2018 to 28 long-term plan project prioritisation process. What specifically, apart from reading that, does that mean and the implication for the Waipu River?
So if you remember back last year, we provided a status update on the dollars that are sitting in the Headley's yard up in Ruatoria, and around the cost of implementing, putting those further in. We've raised concerns, and our Land Rivers and Coastal team, around the return on investment of the extra $2 million worth of spend that would need to be to implement those dollars. Given the existing groins that we've put into the Waipu are working at this stage, this committee has tasked us with coming back with what are we going to do with, I think it's close to $400 that we have got outstanding that haven't been implemented, and what that looks like. When we went through the prioritisation process for the LTP, given that we didn't have a plan for putting those in that was robust enough, and there was $2 million worth of budget sitting against it, it was something that was removed. While we come back with what is a plan for those dollars, given we don't, as staff, we don't recommend the expenditure given the way that the river is right now. We'd rather come back to you with a better plan for going forward with that.
With respect, Mr. Chairman, back to David. In terms of, I mean, the long-term plan, we must have something there, not just riverbank protection in terms of the use of those dollars, but the $2 million was a bit beyond what I thought it would be. However, who makes those kind of decisions, and how can they be persuaded otherwise? Because the question is, I mean, the longer we delay this, especially as I said yesterday at the top end where the Pata comes into the Tapuaro, there would have been at least 7 hectares taken away last winter. And there's a desperate need for the use of them. As a council, we can't allow them to be sitting there in Headley's yard or the bottom of the Kainanga. I mean, at the end of the day, it's us who's looking the fools.
The decision whether or not there's funding is, of course, a council decision, and that's for you as councillors if you would like to put budget aside as part of that. What we're saying is, given the state of the Waipu River without a catchment plan, or how we are going to develop up maintaining or managing that catchment, we need to have something that we can give to you as councillors to make a decision on whether or not you want to include funding for it at the moment. We don't have an option at the moment that we think is a viable one sitting there, so we're looking to develop that up.
Supplementary to that, Mr. Chairman, there is a plan, as I understood, that is here with council within the rivers and land section to plant the whole of the Waipu from joining those two rivers. And I understood that the use of the dollars would complement that. So given the amount of money you're talking, sure, that, you know, it's a concern. But we just can't leave them there for another. They've been there 4 or 5 years now.
So this committee has tasked Neil Dakin, the Land Rivers and Coastal Manager, to come back with a plan for those dollars. He's given his advice that the current plan that's there now is not a good investment for us as council. So he's coming back with the better option in his opinion, in his professional opinion, as to how we would do the rollout of those, because the methodology that's there now is very time consuming and it's also very expensive. So he's going to propose a better one coming forward, and that'll come back to the committee.
Understand that, through Mr. Chairman, David, understand perfectly what you're saying, but look at the success, both in protecting Ruatoria and what it's done to protect the road on the Kainanga in terms of council were directly involved there. Our own engineers put those dollars into place, and sure, the cost to the Ruatoria community and the wider community in terms of the Ruatoria protection is huge and getting bigger every year. But I mean, what I'm saying is those dollars are there for a purpose, and we, the council, have a responsibility to utilise them in time, not wait another 10 years. Don't mind me, Mr. Chairman, I get a bit excited about this.
I just had patience, 10 out of 10. Dave, one thing that I wasn't even aware we were doing, but I see that we are now deferring, is the Taruheru River Channel improvements. Why is this project not proceeding? Is it just because of prioritisation? Thank you.
So this is a project that was in the last long-term plan, and this was around enabling the weir that was proposed in the Taruheru River. So it's something that is in there. We have to report on it around our ways going forward, but there's been a paper to previous committee to say we're not carrying on with this project given the weir's not proceeding.
Is through the chair. On page 130 under network efficiency investigation, it's stating there that we may be engaging a consultant to tell us the best routes for our heavy traffic vehicles. Haven't we got enough expertise in the Tairāwhiti roads to advise us? I mean, some of us could probably tell you the best routes and we wouldn't charge too much.
So through the chair, I understand the concern around us with consultants. What we need to do, of course, is to meet the better business case criteria for NZTA. And part of that is showing that we've exhausted the options for what's there. We're not looking to make that a cumbersome exercise, and we've got funding from NZTA around getting that business case developed up around where the best way to use our network is. It's not just within the Gisborne urban area. This is the one that's looking wider on how we feed the different parts of the district that we want to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. But with respect, the options are relatively limited, even in the wider part of the district. So it shouldn't be a costly exercise. I just like, I mean, these papers are fascinating and we had a bit of a debate yesterday, but if we could turn to page 132, and is the target a physical progress of the project, or is it the dollars spent? And particularly what jumps out for me is the comparison or the similarity between the Douglas Street Stormwater Improvements Project, and I feel really comfortable asking this now the press have gone, and the Lloyd George Stormwater Improvement Project, because one is going to go ahead this year and the other one isn't, and yet they're both 55% actual, and I'm not sure whether that's money spent or development of the project. And if it's money spent, I'd have to be quite worried because neither of the projects are started.
So the way that these projects are reported back is there are milestones within our reporting system, and it can include everything right back from when the project started and then to tender documents and those things. So in behind that is the milestones that have been set up by that team. So it's completely on the milestones that are internally. Around it's got nothing to do with the funds that are being spent. It's around how we're progressing the project right from the very start to the very end of it as well. And you're correct, Douglas Street will come up red next time because it does, of course, have a hold, and we'll be putting a paper to the next committee meeting around that project being pushed out by a year.
Thank you. You can see why we'd be confused, supplementary, because they're both at 55%. Thanks.
Just before you go, and I'd like to make a comment on one of the proposed cycleway down Rutiny Road, is it? That's right, nothing to do with that just a moment. And when we were told it was presented to us, they were saying that they would put it on the side of the road where there were less services. So to avoid conflict with services, or when, and I don't know that we actually got a side, but I was thinking of it later on, and really it really needs to be on the Kaiti Hill side of the road, because when you get to the far end, otherwise you'd have to, would there be an underpass under the bridge out here or something like that, would there? Yeah, okay, so, well, it's not so bad then. Yeah, okay, that's right. Question answered.
Can I make a quick comment? I remember last year, Councillor Seymour and Councillor Thompson and myself had a quick chat about the concerns about the cycleway. Remember the saying it would also be on Wainui Road, and subsequently I've spoken to someone from NZTA, Kathy McVeigh, who used to be from Lisbon, and she, I don't know why she contacted me. But anyway, we discussed that, and I said there were some concerns raised about that, and she didn't say to me that their focus is on the Rutini Road, and definitely not as such focusing on Wainui Road. Yeah, so that's what she said to me when we spoke later on. No, but it was after, I think, when they got the feedback, is what she then said to me is the focus at this stage is definitely in the Rutini Road. So it's just you respond. Go. Let's see one.
No, he's right now because he can ride down Rutini Road because he's not working over there anymore.
So just to support what Councillor Stoltz, the plan has always been for Rutini Road to be the primary cycle route into town. However, there's always been, as part of that urban cycleway, is that there will be some upgrades along Wainui Road as well, because conscious that some cyclists won't use Rutini Road on their way into town. So the focus is, though, to have the premier one being down Rutini Road, away from logging trucks and things like that.
And is that all going to be funded out of the road use and charges?
There's a component that we're paying, and there's a component that NZTA are funding as well.
Right. We haven't got to move a second here. No. Moved by Councillor Stoltz, second by Councillor McLean.
No, I'm not moved out. We need some action in this council. I move something if you've got intention.
I thought I heard you say you'd moved it. Right. Any other questions? All in favour? Against? Carried. Right. That's the finish of that part of the meeting. Moved by Councillor Seymour, second by Councillor Burdett, that we go into public excluded, and it's Helen or Helen's right, isn't it? Yeah. So we're all good?
Cameras off?
Cameras off.